We talked about neurolinguistics programming. I'd like to get back to that and get more detail around that and its impact.
Yeah, it's I didn't really recognize its impact until someone had told me about it. And I remember being in a bar, I think it was in Canada, and I was rather timid when it came to this young lady, not really wanting to go and speak to her. And this guy was giving me some advice, and this was a nerdy guy. I thought I was more handsome than him. He's giving me advice on how to talk to this young lady, and I started to recognize the fact that this guy knows what he's talking about. For me, I've always been that reserved person. I've always been shy when it came to women, and I used to have very severe acne. And I remember a young lady named Flavia who kind of helped me to understand how I was being impacted, unaware of the fact that these things were happening. I was in Costa Rica, and I think it was like 1996, where I'd gone down there to try to learn Spanish. I'd just gone back into grad school, or at least undergrad, finishing that up before grad school. And I'm in Costa Rica for a month, trying to study Spanish, and a group of us went to this bar in Santo Domingo, or I forget, the San Jose, I believe the main city was, the capital. And we're there, and I'm sitting at this bar, it's getting late, and this young lady, I see her across the bar. And I'm looking over at her, very attractive, and more attractive than I felt comfortable talking to. And I see her stand up and start walking in my direction. And I'm starting to get very nervous about the situation because, again, I'm here. I had very low self-esteem. I had severe acne. I was always worried about the perception. I'm here in a situation now where she's not going to understand me. I'm not going to understand her. So I've got the language gaps, and she's approaching me. And you go into that fight or flight mode where it's just like that rabbit and the fox is getting ready to come over, and I'm trying to figure out how do I break out or how do I talk. And so as she's approaching me, she speaks. And I look at her and I say, "I'm sorry, I don't speak Spanish." And you know what she says to me? She says, "I'm speaking English." But yet I couldn't hear anything she was saying because I was so overwhelmed about the emotion that was occurring, about the embarrassment that I found I was going to be in, not being able to understand her, the fact that if I did understand her, then I've got this whole thing about this young lady that was way out of my league approaching me. And so I was really put off balance. And I began after that point to recognize that I was being directed by my emotions and by my interpretation of an event, because she clearly spoke English, but my senses did not allow me to read and to understand the words that she was communicating, because I felt I was not going to be able to understand the words. Henry Ford, I believe, he said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're correct, because our senses will support our beliefs in those situations and take us in a direction where we're inclined to go. So that was the importance of neurolinguistics programming for me, and understanding kind of like how I was so impacted by at least that specific situation. But I even had another one later on, or actually probably was earlier, where it kind of went into, it was even more impactful because it went into my sense of self and what I was going to be able to accomplish. I mentioned the story before about I was not going to let the events that impact me unfold to determine the course of my life. But I remember two specific situations when I was in high school, in elementary school. And the first one was taking a test. And I don't remember the first time I took that test, but I knew I did rather poorly in it because the teacher said, "You did rather poorly in your test, and we want you to take this test again." And so at that point, I started recognizing, I was more conscious of it. It was in elementary school, I think it was in 5th grade. And I remember being taken to a specific room that I still recall today. It's only about a mile away from my house right now. And I remember being given this test where it was a series of shapes that were laid out in front of me. And I remember taking that test, and I remember not necessarily knowing what I was doing with regards to that test. I remember moving out of that test and then moving on, but recognizing the fact that since she made me take the test again, I must have done poorly on it, and I locked that in. Now, it wasn't until I think it was in 8th grade, I was in South Carolina in a school, and my guidance counselor, I'm here trying to figure out, again, start establishing a route towards college, because I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be Alex P. Keaton of the day in Family Ties and be the young Republican, Lord knows. And at that specific time, this teacher said to me, this guidance counselor said, well, you should probably be looking at this route or this route. And it was all primarily trades, because your IQ is only 90. And with that, you're probably going to be better working with your hands than you will be working with your mind, working with cerebral concepts. And I didn't think much about it, because really the test didn't really matter that too much to me, but I knew it was significant that I'm being told that I'm not as intelligent as the next person. And for the next 15 to 20 years, that rolled through my mind about everything I was doing, everything I was trying to accomplish, that I'm not smart enough. I'm not smart as these white guys that are in the room with me. Even going into grad school and finishing grad school and then going into corporate America and working for Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, I am the imposter who knows that they're going to find out that I don't know what I'm doing, because I can't know what I'm doing because my IQ isn't high enough, which means I'm going to fail out. So I was always looking for the next job, and I was always positioning myself so that I didn't care about this job, because I'm always going to be on to the next job anyway. Again, it's classic imposter syndrome. When you allow yourself to be directed by those things that impact you in such a fundamental way, then they can take you and lead your life into directions where you have no control. And it's not until you become aware of your impact, of really what I say is your intelligences. You know, there's a doctor named Dr. Howard Gardner believes we have 9 different types of intelligences. And I was worried about this mathematical logic that is the IQ test. Meanwhile, I'm finding out I'm really very good in that space, but I'm also very good in other spaces. But I also have gaps in other spaces, because again, with 9 different types of intelligences, I'm going to be very high in certain areas, but I'm going to be lower in other areas. So when you look at me and you compare me against any of those guys that may have gone and worked for the top consulting companies or anybody else out there, fundamentally we are individuals. We are from our creation individuals, and therefore I'm not going to be the same. But if you can look at yourself and find out the spaces where you have your sweet spots, the spaces within those intelligences where you're really strong, and you lean into those spaces, then that's when you can X times your life, X times your world, move yourself in a direction where you're congruent with your knowledge, with your intelligences. And that's really where you create. You come up with your best ideas by leaning into your space and not necessarily worrying about the areas that really you don't have power in, you don't have strength in.